There you are. Welcome. This is Business Insight. Our guest in the house, Chris Diaz. He's a marketing director at Brand Kenya. And of course, Peter Biwott, Chief Executive Officer, Export Promotion Council. Diaz is immediate left on my side. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Good evening to you.
Yeah, and let's do the handshake. There we are. That's Peter Biwott. He's the CEO of Export Promotion Council. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us here. First of all, I want to hear from you. I mean, when you look at the Big Four agenda, especially the area of manufacturing, what are your thoughts on this? And I would want to start with you, Chris. And of course, you are the
Director, Bidco Africa.
Bidco Africa. He's also a director of Bidco Africa, which is one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates here in Kenya. Thank you. I want to hear your views on this.
Well, thank you very much, O'Brien. It's great to be here in your studio, and also a big jumbo to all Kenyans watching this program. For sure, I believe the government has brought a big focus, and we are very confident that if we do everything planned right, we're able to achieve the Big Four objectives. But for manufacturing, it is critical that we also start coming together to look at more investments. At Bidco Africa, we're also putting a new investment. We have an industrial park right now opening up in Ruiru, producing new products. So a lot of the manufacturers are investing in Kenya. So employing more people and also increasing exports, we're able to increase foreign exchange. So we are confident the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the investments coming in the next 5 years, we can get to the 1 trillion mark in terms of 1 trillion Kenya shillings for the exports, to grow that in 5 years. Yeah. The big numbers, if you make the big numbers more easier for people to understand, it's achievable. But we also need to create 1.3 million jobs. And most of these jobs are going to come through manufacturers. Again, manufacturers very focused and getting a lot of support. The private sector and the government working very closely in a partnership.
Very well. Chris, of course, I mean, not Chris, but Peter, this definitely is very good news for you when we are talking about expanding our manufacturing base from the current 9% to around 20%. And of course, this is expected to boost our export. But what do you make of this?
Thank you very much, O'Brien, for inviting me to the national television, Channel 1, KBC. I want to also say chamber to Kenyans, wherever they are. Yeah. But I think we need to put the whole subject into context. And the way I would like to do it is that, first of all, the country seeks to achieve what we call a higher middle income economic status. I think that's the bottom line. Because currently Kenya stands at lower middle income economy. Yeah. And one of the reasons, one of the ways to achieve is to focus on, our long-term blueprint, which through the economic pillar, the Vision 2030 sought to have Kenya to achieve a double-digit economic growth in terms of accelerating the pace of economic development. Yeah. And then now comes the Big Four agenda, which has arisen as a result of a long period of time, or as a result of 5 years period of investments in infrastructure. We have seen investment in the standard gauge railway. We have seen our roads being modernized. Yeah. We've seen our healthcare being improved. Then comes the Big Four agenda, which is set, to take Kenya to the next level. And now focusing on the manufacturing sector. The target of government, of course, is to achieve 15%, share of the gross domestic product. Yeah. I would say that there is a clarion call that, failing to plan is planning to fail. And I think it is a normal occurrence that governments around the world plan, and they have planned and they execute, and they always also say that if you want to fall in the sun, you shoot at the moon. So what you see in the Big Four agenda is something which is possible. Yeah. The targets which have been set actually have been scientifically estimated. And I think if we can be able to, invest, looking at and expanding the production base of the country, because economic history has taught us lessons. If you look at the East Asian, the Asian tigers, if you look at what we call the BRICS, Brazil, India, Africa, China, and South Africa, and others, what they have done is that they've been able to invest in local production. Investing in local production, and as they do that, they focus on enhancing market access. Very well. And I would like to maybe later on explain to you why I think that Kenya's ratification of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a great move by the country. This
is a blessing.
There should be no fear why Kenya has been able to do this, because indeed we know this is where we need to go, and it will really benefit the country.
Thank you. I mean, you sound pretty completely bullish about this plan, and of course it is expected. But I want to hear from you. And before we go, you have a Twitter handle.
Yes, sir.
Please tell me.
At Diaz Chris Africa. At Diaz Chris Africa. Happy to engage.
At EPC _ CEO.
Wow. Very well. If you want to get in touch with these two gentlemen, definitely you have their contact. And my Twitter handle is at O'Brien Kimani. Let's start with you, and let's dive into the issues of export. Tell me this, I mean, how do we plan to slay the dragon of imbalanced or of deteriorating, balance of payments? Look here, I mean, you cannot have a situation whereby you are importing goods worth 1.7 trillion Kenya shillings, and at the same time, you are exporting goods worth 600 billion shillings, almost double. This is not sustainable going into the future.
Not necessarily, Mr. O'Brien. I want to tell you that a developing country like Kenya would still have to import. Importation is not necessarily bad, depending on what you are importing.
That's where I was coming from, actually.
If we are importing infrastructure, capital goods, like now we are building the standard gauge railway, we are importing farm implements to mechanize our farms. Yeah. We are importing technologies to modernize our industrial parks and modernize our manufacturing farms. That is not bad.
But that's not the situation on the ground.
Actually, that's the situation. Of course,
no. I have the data here. I have the data here. Let me try to feed you with data here. Out of total exports for 2017, of course, oil is our top importer. All right.
Yes.
Number two, because of the SGR that is going on, 35% of our import was on mechanized equipment. And number three, can you guess?
Just tell me.
These were very simple things like clothes, shoes, and even toothpicks.
I think
do we really need to import such?
I think, Mr. Brad, you didn't understand me. What I said is that, when a country is importing capital goods, that is what is encouraged. But of course, with our current, with our new exports development and promotion strategy, which seeks now to turn around and to focus Kenya into now, enhancing production of, our agricultural products, inputs, so that we can start value addition. In fact, the analysis you have is good, because what we need to do is that once we've seen that these are some of the products we import, of course we are in a free trade regime as a country. Kenya is a market economy. What we need to do is now to focus our investments tactfully into what we call exports development. I didn't want to say import substitution, so that if we are able to invest and come up with industries at large scale to be able to produce some of these products we import, it would be good for the country. And I think through the Big Four agenda, we are actually set now to turn around and ensure that by the year 2022, we've been able to add value and achieve a balance of payment. I can tell you in the Big Four agenda, the reason why it was targeted at achieving 15% share of GDP. If you look at the Kenya Industrial Transformation Program, that was the target. It means we need to raise manufacturing output from the current about 650 billion Kenya shillings to about 2.3 billion Kenya shillings in terms of manufacturing output. And then a lot of those products to be exported out of Kenya. So already strategies are in place to see how we can be able to turn around and have Kenya an exporting nation or a highly trading nation.
Hold on to your thoughts. I'll be coming back to you shortly. But I want to hear from Chris. I mean, Chris, as one of the biggest manufacturers in this country, how does it make you feel, I mean, when you see us importing detergents and soaps from China?
Well, I would encourage for Kenyans to buy Kenya, build Kenya. As a manufacturer today, first and foremost, let me also focus very closely on what you asked about the balance of trade, and also let's look at let's look at the counties.
Yeah.
The counties today are very important because they have great products and they have great value addition. So connecting the counties and Bidco Africa, we are looking for farmers and we need more sunflower and more soya. So the more value addition, so we take the sunflower and soya, we crush it, we produce oil, and then that's also goes sold to the Kenyan market and is also exported. But the most important thing is the cake which comes out of the crushing is made into animal feed, both for dairy. So again, direct development to agriculture. So manufacturers are really focusing on food security, employment, increasing investments, and also making sure that we export. The market of Kenya is only 45 million, it's going to be 51 million in the next few years. Yeah. If you look at the Africa markets, the Africa markets have opportunity, the tripartite agreement, the Africa agreements, and also free trade and movement of goods and services. Again, the manufacturers are targeting a whole market in Africa of over 1.2 billion people. So the demand for goods and services makes the Big Four realistic if we increase exports. So we got to encourage business, we need to grow the counties, we need to market the country. Yeah. And that's why the authentic, quality, innovative mark, creative mark of Made in Kenya, which is going to position Kenya strongly in Africa, in Kenya, one Kenya, and also for the global markets.
Tell me things, I mean, it is common knowledge, that Kenya is one of the top producers of coffee in the world. But we still import refined coffee in this country, and I'm not going to name many names here. And I want to discuss this, statistically. Coffee production in this country has fallen from 130,000 tons in the year 1988 to around 40,000 tons in the year 2015. And a lot of coffee farms have gone into real estate. And Kiambu, which is my county, is a big victim of this. Yet, the demand for coffee on the international platform, is growing at a rate of more than 7%, and we cannot afford to satisfy the demand. Daktari, what do we plan to do about this? Even as we plan grand plans.
I think I know one of the challenges which has actually discouraged many farmers is maybe the challenges around the value chains of coffee. And what has happened is that there's been a housing bubble whereby real estate has come to be seen to be a very lucrative business. And that's why you see a lot of farmers, especially those who live around towns, converting their farms into real estates. But what I see is that what we need to do is exactly what the Big Four agenda is telling us. If we are able to enhance investments in manufacturing and also to enhance consumption of local products, because the black gold coffee is not highly consumed actually by Kenyans, and that is one of the challenges that makes that product not famous among Kenyans. So if we can be able to, ensure that we modernize our factories, we strengthen the cooperative societies around which the coffee value chains or other sectors of the agriculture sector exist, and ensure that we expand, and we expand local markets as well as regional markets, which is part of the plan the government has actually been doing. Then we will be able to, again turn around and ensure that the question of, enhancing coffee production and then enhancing coffee consumption is achieved. Because what has happened is that one of the biggest challenges we face is lack of sufficient raw materials or the motivation. And I know the government has done a lot in terms of enhancing productivity, including even giving subsidies around fertilizers and other sort of incentives. So I think the big question is, first of all, accepting that we have a challenge, resolving that challenge, investing in the manufacturing of these products, value addition, because until that time, Kenya or African continent will embrace value addition and value expansion. That is the time we will be able to see value for our products. And then we focus on now the African continent.
Tell me this, Chris, I want you to weigh in on, in what he's talking about. But you know, it is the interest of every nation to protect what we call the national interest. Don't you think we should, by now, we should have made coffee, you know, an issue of national interest, just like India has made onions an issue of national interest, whereby before any development is undertaken in a coffee growing zone, I mean, a lot of negotiation has to take place.
That's true, and I agree with you, O'Brien, and just to add value to what Mr. Biwott is saying, I really think that we also need to be very competitive, and we need to encourage, and it's of national interest. Coffee or tea is our biggest export brands, and we need to increase partnerships. Again, marketing of coffee has to be really done at a much higher level. We need more investment into the marketing of coffee and tea also. But I also think that we need to be competitive. And you heard this in the Trade Week, all the manufacturers, all the producers talking about support from the government to achieve the big four is being competitive. You have to look at the processes, you have to look at cost of logistics. We also have to look at the cost of power, and we also got to review some of our tax regimes. And we got to also have a lot of incentives to reach these big numbers. So there's the partnership, competitiveness, new markets, new consumers, and changing consumer behavior, like he said, that us Kenyans, we need to consume more coffee. Coffee is very healthy. Yes.
And tell me things, I mean, look at, for example, the issue of fish. I mean, we are endowed with huge natural resources whereby we can actually get our own fish and feed them to the world. We have Lake Turkana up in the north. We have Lake Victoria, you know, just around here. We are surrounded by Indian Ocean. We have Lake Naivasha, Lake Nakuru. Why do we still import fish from China?
I do agree with you that we need to enhance local production. Of course, there will be no time that we will stop international trade happening. What we just need to do as a country is to focus, and I think the export strategy has clearly indicated the challenges that the various sectors are actually facing, including the fish sector. And we've been able to realize that we need to modernize technology around production. We need to ensure that you know, we develop our value chains around you know, production and preservation of our products, whether it is fish or other fresh products. We need to deepen our local markets, our regional markets. We need also to focus our citizens into realizing the need of trading across borders on high value added products within the continent. Because the benefit of trading within the continent, like for example, you talked about Lake Victoria, there can be a lot of trade between you know, Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania and the neighboring countries like the DRC on some of these products. But I think as we move forward and as the strategy has actually proposed, we need to, you know, strengthen those value chains. We need to have entrepreneurs in the Chamber of Commerce, in the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, entrepreneurs in the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, to be able to weigh in and, you know, through what we call backward and forward linkages or subcontracting, take up some of these ventures and assist the farmers who will be the suppliers. I heard Chris earlier on talking about, you know, subcontracting to farmers to supply their factories. So the same can be done in the fish sector. It takes the larger investors to take interest in some of these sectors and then inject, you know, resources, partnering with government, and then assisting the smallholder Kenyans who do these kind of businesses to be able to grow, because the small medium enterprises are a very critical component of our economy. They are the base, the foundation, and creating those kind of partnerships and undertaking capacity building on some of the requirements that are needed to develop exportable products will be very key. And I think this is what the Export Promotion Council is doing with other partners. And also counties, as Chris has said, counties, the role of trade development falls within the county. If there can be public-private partnerships, a role of public-private partnership approach, because sometimes you hear challenges like scarce resources, lack of financial support. If we can be able to synergize and work together, and I think this is one of the objectives of government within the Big Four agenda and within the National Export Strategy, to be able to partner with others, then the question of resource scarcity will not be there.
Tell me this, Chris. I mean, in the 70s, Kenya used to export sugar to Europe, and we all know this. Right now, we cannot even afford to meet our local consumption. We are importing sugar from our neighbors, and as far as South of America, Brazil, and so much. And it's not that we can't grow sugarcane in this country. We can grow sugarcane, but what are the problems here?
So I think you're touching on a very important subject, which is also important, that Kenya is very rich in agriculture, and the people of Kenya are great resources. So we really need to invest in agriculture. But I just want to add to a point that he said, which is very important, Kenyans are watching, the blue economy. We have a very big conference, and I know you're going to be involved in November. Yeah. First time in Africa, the world is going to see a whole blue economy congress in Kenya. And be it sugar, be it all other products or whatever we can produce, what he has touched on is very important. We need to support the citizens of the different counties, the coast, Kisumu, Turkana, because the blue economy is not just also about producing fish and encouraging the small SMEs and the fishermen on the ground. But we also got to look at energy, water can
transport.
Come, sustainable development goals. You know, all these can be grown through the blue economy. So I think the food security goal, manufacturing goal, the health goal, the housing goal, all comes in play with development, both from agriculture, blue economy, and to encourage young farmers and to be entrepreneurs. The two things that's going to change Kenya is entrepreneurship and employment. So we need to increase employment, and we need to encourage entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs are so many, and Kenyans are very talented.
And of course,
wanted to weigh in.
I'm coming back to you shortly. I have a point that I don't want to lose right now. I mean, and it's very important that you're talking about the Blue Economy Conference that is coming up sometimes in November here. But let me ask you this. I mean, for example, look at Masinga Dam, which is part of the seven, we used to call them the 7 Forks dams. Let's pick one, Masinga Dam,
right,
that sits on a space of 30,000 acres of water just lying there,
right,
okay, waiting to generate electricity. We can do so much, from cage fishing, okay, to water sports.
Tourism.
And tourism, of course. Yeah. But yet, look at that, all that resources, going to waste and sitting there idle. I mean, aren't we missing so much on the blue economy?
I think blue economy, the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries have a big focus. They have partnerships, they have programs. I mean, globally, the blue economy is producing trillions of dollars annually in terms of various nations. We got to do this in partnership. We've got to learn also from the other nations how they've done very well. But again, as you say, Masinga, look at the coast, 200 nautical miles, 250,000 square kilometers of beautiful ocean, not only for tourism, but again for fish and for transforming Kenya in terms of food security.
Even sea mining.
Even sea mining, exactly. So this is an opportunity for Kenyans, and we need to get involved. We need to create those partnerships. The government is very focused. The private sector is investing. So we need to go forward now, step by step, measure year by year, to see that more Kenyans are involved with this investment.
As you respond as you weigh in on the issue that we were discussing earlier on, I also want to hear from you. Look at the Kenyan market. I mean, counterfeit goods and illegal goods, in the market. Let's talk about, favorable estimates of about 40% of all the goods in the Kenyan markets are fake. How has this impacted our export? And be brief.
Yeah, maybe before I come to the question of counterfeits, I just wanted to tell you that you talked about the 70s, and there's been an economic shift. If you look at the 70s and coming to the 90s, there was an economic shift whereby most African economies were actually, guided into what we call free trade economies. Through, what other people call one size fits all. Yeah. So what happened is that when we opened up through the structural adjustment programs, most African countries were not able to adapt, because by the time we were opening up our economies, and I remember Kenya liberalized our economy around 1991, 92, we were not able to develop enough safeguard measures to protect our industries. And what caused that reversal from an exporting country to an importing country was that lack of adaptation to this kind of economic reality. But coming to the issue of counterfeits, of course, counterfeits, or let's say illicit trade, I think it is better to discuss this as illicit trade, because illicit trade is composed of counterfeits, counterfeiting, it is composed of, you know, sale of substandard goods, it is also composed of dumping, which means selling products in the economy below the cost of production, will actually affect the delivery of the Big Four if not checked. And I think the government has realized this, and we are putting a lot of efforts in ensuring that we cap the menace, because counterfeits will industrialize the economy, because it will kill the manufacturing sector. Illicit trade will also have, you know, agricultural productivity lowered. It will affect the medical, I mean, the healthcare sector. It can also affect the construction sector, because if you use substandard or you know, counterfeit building materials, and maybe that is why we see a lot of buildings collapsing. So this is a very serious deterrent to our economic progress, and we need to use this opportunity to call on Kenyans to be alert and support the government initiatives around capping illicit trade in the country.
Very well. Because we have to wind up, time is not on our end. Chris, I mean, you're part of the team that is, you know, branding this country and, of course, ensuring that you know, we have a positive image out there. Let me ask you this. I mean, what are some of the biggest threats to brand Kenya?
Wow, so that's quite a straightforward answer for you. Number one, we need to be having positive narratives. An area that is of big concern is also corruption. The government is fighting corruption very hard, and this is critical because investors want to come into Kenya. You're positioning the country together, one Kenya, one country. It's a great campaign, made in Kenya. You're increasing exports, you're encouraging consumption in Kenya, you're encouraging manufacturing, you're encouraging employment. Also global positioning. It's very important for Kenya to be seen out there. It's not just the runners winning, which is great, but it's also to see that our brands are out there and they're being consumed. That means more foreign exchange earnings, which again supports the Kenyan economy. So we need to grow the economy. I mean, we from GDP from 6 to 7%. We have very good targets. So marketing of this country is critical. That we come together as Kenyans. We make every Kenyan a brand ambassador, so they position positive narratives and they talk about the great things of Kenya and the great attractions in Kenya. And
you also fail to talk about funding, which has always been an issue to you.
You know, funding comes from, you have to look for partnerships country to country. You have to look at also, you have to invest, and the government is investing in marketing. But Kenya Tourism Board, Brand Kenya, all the marketing organizations are being funded now, and I think we need to invest more in marketing this country.
Finally, from you, in 30 seconds, on Tuesday, you know, Deputy President said that you know, government plans to merge Brand Kenya and Export Promotion Council. I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on this proposed merger.
When you are called to order by government, you have no otherwise but to comply. I think in its totality, if you look at it, the government must have seen you know, the opportunities of bringing institutions together. This is not the first one. They have done many others. And what we need to do now, once a call has been made for us to merge, we have no others but to merge, but we ensure that we position our country, we continue doing our work in public service, and to make Kenya a great country.
Very well. Gentlemen, thank you so very much indeed for joining us here.
Thank you very much.
And of course, we wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Buy Kenya, build Kenya.
Buy Kenya, build Kenya.
Build Kenya.
Let's go for the handshake. Asante sana.
Thanks to all the best.
Chris Diaz, Director of Brand Kenya, and Peter Biwott, Chief Executive Officer of Export Promotion Council, joining us here on Business Insight.